Okay, cool, alright. Alright, here we go. Yes. And is there another? You have your sheet.
Watch your pour down the floor. Kiss it, yes. Another thing, questions on it. The sheet. Are there two over there?
I just have this one.
That's you. Okay, we got it from Allison. Is it okay? That's mine. Okay. Oh, no, that's not from that.
No.
Oh. Here.
Alright.
Okay, I'm gonna get the stapler here.
It's a little over. But I've read this. I'm reading this. Well, I guess you kind of do it. You could tell what it says. We're going to present this process. Let's go see it.
Yeah, I do have it. You will put this one, did you?
No.
We're going to start with that.
Yeah. right, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us for our first virtual series, Art in Conversation. This is a monthly virtual series at the BMA that highlights an artist or work of art, inviting participants to join the dialogue. So is there a thought that you would like to share about this month's artist? Do you have a specific question you've always wanted to ask? By signing up for Art in Conversation, you have the opportunity to shape the discussion by posing your question in advance. My name is Kerry Fountain. I'm the manager of public programs at the Birmingham Museum of Art, and I will be facilitating this conversation, including your questions into the dialogue. For this first series, I introduce local artist and friend Sara Garden Armstrong. Sara Garden Armstrong is a nationally and internationally exhibiting artist based here in Birmingham, Alabama. Her 5 decades of work explore a wide variety of mediums, including paintings, art installations, and artist books, all exploring organic processes of change and transformation. Her most recent work uses a range of tools, including movement, light, and sound, to investigate the interactions between various physiological phenomena in the human body. After 35 years in New York, Sara moved back to Birmingham in 2017, continuing her own artwork and continued mission of supporting local artists through her cooperative gallery space, Ground Floor Contemporary and 21st Street Studios. For this talk, we take a deep dive into her upcoming monograph, Sara Garden Armstrong, Threads and Layers, which is the first comprehensive look at 5 decades of work from the multimedia artist. Throughout the talk, we have incorporated all of the questions that have been submitted when you all registered. Every few questions, we will include a viewer-submitted question. As the talk goes on, please leave any other questions that come to mind in the chat box, as we will take a 10-minute intermission 35 minutes into the talk to answer any questions left in the chat. We will also take another break at the end of the talk to answer any more questions in the chat before we close out. So without further ado, I introduce Sara Garden.
Thank you. So I guess we'll stand apart to get the questions started.
Yep.
Yeah.
We keep our distance.
Uh-huh.
We're here in the studio. Very relaxing space. All kind of stuff going on. And for our first question, we were going to start with a viewer question from Virginia H. And her question was, what projects are you working on now?
Okay. Well, Kerry, I'm going to go right where you are.
Okay.
Take my mask down.
Okay.
So that was I appreciate that question, because I really am in a sort of big, this monograph, which really began in 2018 when Paul Barrett, the curator, met with me and came up with the concept that we ought to do a traveling exhibition and also to have a monograph that went with that. So I would love, and I would just sort of love to sort of take you through the beginning of how this is doing, how the monograph is. And so on this wall, you can see this is sort of, well, let me start with this. We should put it back because we don't have basketball. In fact, we don't have basketball. I don't have to wear the vest. Okay, this is the book, and it is 216 pages. It has 2 versions. It's going to have the book, and then it's going to have a limited edition where it goes into a slipcase, and then it's going to have a drawing, an individual drawing that's different in each one, so that you can see. But just to sort of give you a sense of what, it sort of ends with the begins with end pages that have that, and sort of goes through here. I'm going to sort of walk down. It begins with an introduction by a foreword by David Ebony and an introduction by Gail Andrews, which is up there. So I have basically worked on this book visually, with the walls so I could see. You know, I'm a visual artist, I have to see. And the computer screen just doesn't do that for me. And but like here, this deals with sound from the early pieces that I did here in Birmingham, an early piece that I did at the Birmingham Museum, given a space, and it sort of goes through the Airplayers. And then this is a conversation with architect that was a close friend and that we worked together for a long time, Alan Bruton, where we talk about space and sort of that. And then there's a whole section on the Airplayers artist book, which is with Laura Lieberman, who really wrote about that when it first came out. Then artist books that are right here, and then about process, which is by Daniel White, and he is the curator, director of the gallery, the UA Gallery in Tuscaloosa, where I have a show up right now, and the Arts Council. And then it sort of goes on. It talks about space. Space has been a really big thing to me. You know, how you relate to space, how the physicality of it. And so Alice Bauscher talks about that. And then Dana Marie Limmer talks about, who is the director of the Wiregrass Museum, where the show will go next. And she talks about my southernness in relation to, which I do feel like I am. And then it has a chronology, and which sort of traces a lot of this. It ends with a page of videos with QR codes so that those you can be directed, like 18 different ones. It's sort of, I've done videos for ages, and Karen has done a lot of these videos, but Hunter has, Hugh Hunter, but so that will go onto the website. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so your book is titled Sara Garden Armstrong, Threads and Layers. Could you speak a little bit about the difference in between a thread and layer and how that permeates through the work?
Okay. Well, you know, there are threads that have gone through the work. The thread of contradictions, the organicness, and so it really, they sort of move on. And this book has been this great experience of me having people write about and talk about, and being able to sort of we never spend time except what we're working on right at the moment, and we never get to look back. And so this has been able to let me see the sort of concepts, the issues that I have dealt with, the shifts of reality, you know, and then for me it's also layering things on top of each other, that I feel like that, I also feel like as a Southerner, you know, and as a Southern artist coming from here, that you are affected by the layers that we have, and they're all part of your life. And I feel like my work has a huge number of layers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, beginning as a painter and then gradually your work becoming more sculptural and multidisciplinary, what inspired you? What has been the biggest things that have inspired you to combine disciplines and evolve?
Well, when I was an undergraduate, this is after finishing a degree at Birmingham Southern teaching, I went back to art school because that's what I knew I wanted to do. But I, at that point, being a little older, I was doing sculpture and flat. And I was also very minimalist, and I was very organic. And so I've never really been able to separate. I've always been able to, I've gone the directions I felt the work needed to go. And so that meant combining. And it's who I am. And I think that I've kept pushing that area, and from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Was there a moment, like if you look back throughout all the years, was there a specific moment that stands out to you, or in pushing you and thinking differently about your work?
I'm not quite sure of that question, because there are lots of moments with everything. But if I want to say, when I looking back, that I knew that I was going in contradictory directions, is when I remember these very minimal blue boxes that I actually built at the museum, and then I had these very handheld, sensual, sort of phallic poems I was working on. So they were complete contradictions. And I think most of my life has been contradictions and problem solving.
Okay. Well, for our next question, we actually have a viewer question from Julie C., who asks, I would like to know more about putting the installations up. Are you always present? or do you make adjustments as you go?
So, and I've mentioned about space. Okay, space is critical to me. And so I work with models because I'm always trying to, an installation is something that's not just paintings that you go install, but even paintings. I will make, a model. With the shows that are up now, Paul Barrett and I worked with the spacing, but everything always changes when you are in the space. So and you'll see there are models really all around here too that we aren't really looking at, but it's a way for me to understand and study the space. So yes, I always should change because I'm always trying to, you physically feel it in the space. And so, and a lot of my work is about physicality.
So are there any relationships you're trying to build with the viewers that experience your work?
Yes. I definitely, particularly in the installations, I want there, if something's over here, I want there's a physicality. I want you moving through it. And what's very interesting when you have an opening and you have tons of people, a lot of times the installation is killed because, you want people, but it is because there are too many people, the physicality between the work and you is damaged. So it can only take so many people before the people become the physicality.
So how do you use drawings to aid in your process? And would you describe them as more expressive or explanative?
So one of the things I was, we'll put up the littoral drawing. I thought that I would just talk about that a little bit. This series of drawings were about translating the water's edge and about the time, that moment that never is again. And so I began really with an idea, a concept, but also a very large problem about how you do that. And so I use drawings to be as an object, but as also as something that you can view as a very much finished piece of work. So with the littorals, you can see they're pretty much they have a very flat, very Asian feel, but that is about trying to let the markings of the water's edge. And what I did was photograph that and then project that up, and then the drawings came out of that translation. So did you move from we're off the littorals then?
All right. So next we have a viewer question from Diane B. and Melissa S. And they had asked, would you please tell us about your materials and your process? Why did you choose the mediums that you use?
Okay. With that, I think you put up a model, an image with the model on it. Let me talk about sentient matrix. And again, materials for me are a search to find the right material, and then in the search I always discover things, and it helps me to figure out how and what to do. So if you look at the model, is that up now? Mm-hmm. Okay. If the model, I did this model, the piece is it's actually located in Birmingham, and it is about multiple sclerosis, and it was a commission, and the piece had to be about multiple sclerosis. So I had studied it, and then I came up with this model, but I did not know how to build it. I didn't know the materials. So the search for materials there, you can see there's a sort of very clear material, and also I didn't know whether it ended up being paper and gel medium, and a lot of different types of materials with LEDs going through. So I had to go through this whole big process and study, trying to understand the materials. And you can see over on the other a year and a half later, the piece is installed. But it was a gift to work through so many searches for materials. And this piece has also affected me. I had to get a beater for making pulp because I had to use so much fiber. So now I continue using a lot more paper fiber because I have my own facility right here.
Okay. All right. So, how did you begin working with paper fiber?
I actually began with handmade paper, buying handmade paper and working with that. And then it ended up that as I one of my first shows in New York, I was with an artist that was an amazing paper maker, Sara Garden. And so I also found out that I could then go to this paper mill, Dudene paper mill, and that opened up huge amount of doors. So, everything we do keeps opening doors. And paper fiber is extremely organic, and the texture, and these are things that I really, I'm searching for. So that is really how I began paper.
Yeah. So, how did it become, or why did it become so integral in your work?
Because it fits. It is, the paper fiber, you can do so many things with it. It can be very translucent, it can be layered, it can have texture, you can build these very organic forms with it. So as I progressed in the Airplayers series, and actually wall pieces, I realized that I could have these shaped forms. I could go to the paper mill and work there. And then eventually, like I was just mentioned a few minutes ago, is I actually have much more facility now here. I never think of myself as a paper maker, but yet I've used paper for 40 years. But it's basically, I'm not using it just as a sheet form. I'm using it much more as a sculptural form.
Okay. So the next question, I actually have a little excerpt from your book. The question is, does your work focus more on object or concept? And just going to your book, the next piece will also depend on the next space. Of course, each new piece seems to come out of the previous one. So do you approach new work from where you left off, off with your previous work? Or is there an ongoing investigation happening throughout your career and currently?
There is an ongoing investigation, and I think I was going to. Do we have images of this?
We do.
Okay, yeah. So let me just sort of say we've got an image, Decem Aspire, which was another atrium piece, and I think you've got it up there. That commission was it had to breathe. It is a firm, a biotech firm, which is very concerned with its medicalness is concerned with breathing. So that was the commission. So there was this concept that it had to be, but it also, again, for me, it became a drawing in space. But the breathing part really affected me. I had done breathing for years with the Airplayers series, but nothing that I had done that was a permanent piece. They were all installations. So they went up for a month or 2 months, and then or whatever the length, and then they came down. So this was very much of a challenge, and it also affected me. I think one of the things I do love is when I have to be so engrossed in a piece of work that you're just consumed in it, and for me it pushes you further, and it also opens more doors. So is the breathing part up now, the bags part that were interior? So what you'll see here is the forms were very translucent sort of fabric, and again the discovery of the materials. But the inside, I figured that it had to breathe. And again, I built a model and with the forms without really knowing how those forms were going to breathe, what it was that was going to, what was the covering outside of it going to be. But that really, again, it leads you. The outside covering, or finally I discovered, they basically are sort of the colors of the hands of the people that were working with me. So that was what sort of held it together. But the breathing inside bags, I wanted to be, again, this very organic. And it led me to a lot of the sort of pulp and staining and paintings that I was later going to do. And whereas if you put up Murmuring Landscape, this is a number of years after this. The film was in 2012, and this is 2017 or 18. And I am working on this work, and I thought, it sure seems familiar, like I've done this before. But I was staining, and I had done that in the bags, and so it just made me go back and think, oh, all these years, now I'm doing that. I had done it some, but it's really made me focus that I'm picking up what I've done before. And I think for me, there are just multiple examples of how you, as you work forward, you also work back and do that.
All right, so next question, we had a viewer question from Mary C.
Okay.
And she asked, what is your inspiration?
What is my inspiration? I think that environment, living, the nature, organic issues, searching, process, all of these things become inspiration. The exploration, and then the problem solving or the discovery, and the searching. Those are such amazing things that make you get up in the morning and think again and think again. And I think that and the work of just working as an artist, and also community, people you talk to, people you respond to, someone asks you a question. So I think inspiration is a very large piece that is very, stimulating and wonderful.
So you find your inspiration is shifts?
Yeah. Yeah, I do know with that I love to work alone, and I love to be bouncing off of people. So there are lots of the inspiration come in so many different ways.
Okay. So segueing into Airplayers. So your Airplayers limited edition book incorporates motion, light, sound, and print all into a very inventive design that combines to make it a very intricate and innovative project, especially for the 1990s. When making the book, did you come across any setbacks? What was the process to create something so innovative, and how did the initial vision develop?
Okay. Well, this was a really big project for me. And I decided that I was doing installations. I was also traveling in Europe a good bit. And with an installation, you can't take it with you. I thought, I have to have something that's portable that can talk about the work that I've done. And so I began, there was a publisher, and he said, I'll work with you. But you've got to have light in the book. And he had read something about someone that had light in a book. And I thought, okay. So it began there. I did refinance my place to make the money to finance this big project, and took 1.5 years to do it. And it was, how was I going to translate over 10 years of work into a book? So that, I began with this giant problem. I started with going up to the Museum of Natural History, because I could look into places, and I kept thinking, how am I looking into something? And I had a giant number of people that worked with me, so smart, so interesting. And but it slowly, the piece slowly became something. And I had when I first got the tech Bob Balaki, when he said he'd work with me, that was a big deal. So it was just it all slowly developed. And let me just show you. Even when I did this piece in 1990, well, it came out in 1990, but it was I was going to do this very large number, of which the little Airplayer book, which is here, which is a part of it, and it has light. This one has been set up to go and has a lot of different layers and vellums and pages and lenses, and then it opens up into a light in the center, which has a battery. But this one is wired connect because it's going to show in the show and still be on. But it fits in this box, and there is a video that fits in here on one side, and the book fits here. And then this is the limited edition. This was the book, so it was edition of 1,000. This was 65. I didn't do very many. I just had, so in this was that miniature environment that I finally figured out that could be with the light and sound, and it has a back and a front, and it has recharging, and it sort of sits in here, and that is a digitized blower sound that is sort of like 2 minutes, I think, and it's run on an EPROM. But it was a pretty interesting, amazing project to work on with a huge amount of problems. But then, I do not start with what the piece of work is going to look like. I have a concept of where I'm going, and for me, it usually keeps getting better. It's better, that's part of what it's about. But and then this can go back in here. So
with your artist books, replicating layers in transparency and organic imagery, we see in your painting and sculpture. Was this intended to make your work more accessible? Did it impact future painting and sculpture? And if so, in what ways?
So definitely it was done to be more accessible. I think I did 750 of these pieces. Every piece that went out, I'm sure I lost money because it's obsessively hand done. Everything was silk screened, pyramided, heat bent, all of that. So it was about that. It also affected me. You will see a piece when we go out into the gallery studio space that has some of the electronics from here in it. So I also used the lens. There's a lens in here that I used a lot because it was a material that I could use. So it had a huge, it had a huge effect on what I did next. I went into a good bit more text stuff and pieces with sound and light after this.
Mm-hmm. And the question I just thought about is, how did the process with Airplayers, did you find any parallels between that and the book?
Well, one of the things with the book with the Airplayers, I thought, if I could do that, I could do this. I think we all get confidence as we, the more we do, the more we understand we can do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now, do we want to go to the gallery?
Yeah, let's go to the gallery. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
that's the question.
Yeah, so as we move on, we're going to move spaces and transition to Sara's gallery. But we have another viewer question from Connie U, Tanya N, and Melissa E. Has the pandemic had an effect on your practice? How have you found motivation and inspiration to create during COVID-19? And have you created any art during the pandemic?
Okay. So shall we just move and then I'll answer that in the other space. So I think you can see a drawing that's called time mapping right now. And to answer that question, or a part of that question is, yes, I have done some work, and that is a whole series of drawings that are called time mapping. They've really grown out of trying to do the drawings for the limited edition. And I realized, instead of cutting them, that they were really a whole new series of work. And I think we're now back in here in the gallery studio. We're here. Okay, so let me also answer, one of the things I think about the pandemic is, and being isolated, is if you didn't have a project or didn't get yourself into a project, it made it much harder. And I was just one of the lucky ones because I had the book and it had to keep progressing. And so it gave me, particularly to begin with, this sort of concentrated, quiet time. And because we didn't at first, we didn't see anyone, we didn't do anything. And I also live in a big space. So I could just keep focused on. And so that was a sort of gift. And I was thankful art also grew out of it. But the book has been a piece of work for me. And because it's been a visual, and it's also being able to think about who I am and what I've done in a verbal way, more than I think I have spent time, because I think I am extremely physical and and visual. And the words are not as easy for me. And the book project has done some of that. It has helped me to be able to see that.
Mm-hmm. So in regards to space's relationship to your work, what was the leading cause for you to move back to Birmingham after being in New York for so many years?
So, as you get older, you think about, what do you want to do and all that. And so I had already been thinking, when I did the sentient piece, I had never had a studio space here until I did that piece here. And doing the piece here, I thought, oh, this is pretty good living here. But New York is where I was. And but I had a period where I had to have a back surgery, and so I was very confined and at that moment in time, I lived in an apartment. And to be confined in that and thinking, this is not good. It's not good. And I started realizing at that moment it was time to move back to Birmingham, just figure out the process and how we were going to do it. And I often think about people right now living in New York. I think we'll see a lot of changes. I think we will see, we're going to see everybody changing some, because it has given us a compressed time to think about what we want to do.
And while we're here, I believe we're at the midway point. So if we have any questions, or if y'all have any questions, drop them in the chat. And we'll try to answer those, or answer as many as we can. We'll also have a period of time at the end. So drop those questions in the chat. Do we have any? Okay.
But we have some questions that people didn't, or we could do those at the end, or if someone.
So maybe we'll just go in the end and we'll just add those on.
Okay. Shall I also just talk about in here a little bit? So this at times is a gallery space. It is a workspace. And 21st Street Studio on the ground floor also we show here once a year. But it's pretty much, there's another littorial which is just, it was unwrapped because it goes to, there are 3 littorials that go to the Wiregrass Museum, and I had to get it flattened because it had been rolled up for so long. And here are 2 more of the time mapping pieces, the drawings that I was telling you about, that is a sort of new series of work. And it took me a while to even figure out what the title was, that and then I finally had to get that. But it's about, again, staining. These don't have the fiber as much, but it is this layering. And you're working on accidents and controlled accidents and chance and change. And so that you're manipulating it and you're waiting, you're searching to see something that you don't know and that is going to be what you're going to want or you don't want. But it's, I love doing it. And, I was talking to you about this is the mechanism. This is not it's an older piece that I'm sort of reworking, and it has the mechanism from the Airplayer bookwork. And then here would be pieces that the Ford pulp pieces that would be, and there's some more around here.
So, have you always been okay with accidents and accepting? I guess because what it sounds like is the process. It's all about the process in your work. Is that correct?
I think it is not all about the process. It's about having accidents, searching for something, manipulating, controlling, and not controlling, and trying to figure out, that what it is when it happens or it doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. And it's the same as when I build a model and I'm trying so hard to figure out what the material can be. If I don't know, mm-hmm. Sometimes I do, but a lot of times I put in the model something that I don't understand how to build.
Mm-hmm. And does that process feel therapeutic at all to you?
It feels, it gives you a great deal of energy. Mm-hmm. And it is, I don't mind being nervous. I don't mind being lost. I sort of, it's part of what I think, pushes me. Mm-hmm. And so in that way it's therapeutic because it gives you the good life. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when I'm really nervous and working really hard on something and I just have to say to myself, enjoy it because this is the good life.
Thank you for that. Moving on, the next question I had, just going back to your relationship with space in Birmingham, in New York. Can you elaborate on how the spaces you live and work impact your art making, your beginning in Birmingham, and the parallels between moving back?
That's a big question, and I'll try without images. So yes, space has been an extremely important thing. In getting this building, I was kicked out of a couple places, and I thought if I'm living in Birmingham, Alabama, I'm going to have space. And so I got this building with someone, a very smart guy, and we worked on it. And then soon after that, I decided I'm moving to New York. But this place was so important to me that I could not lose it. So I kept this, and that's when I started renting out spaces here. And it has been, and it still is, the wall space and being able to have space to work and not rooms. It's big open spaces. I learned a great deal of skills. I didn't grow up learning how to build things. So all the spaces have given me those issues of construction. I have a giant respect for construction folks. And so in problem solving, they're great. I mean, that's what they do, is you're building and you've got to solve the problem. And so that I think we all do things that really help each other. And I've learned with installing atrium commissions that construction people have great eyesight for spotting something because they've been working on that.
Mm-hmm. Do Do you feel like Birmingham brings a different kind of work out of you than New York?
Well, I think it's a gift to be living here now.
Yeah.
So New York is a little hard to make a difference. I think all of us can make a difference here. And that is really something, really. We also can be this community together. You are communities in New York. You're very much different communities. But here I think we've got a chance to do something more because we are on a lot smaller scale. And what is part of that question I'm not answering because I lost it?
Well, it was elaborating on how spaces you live and work impact your art making.
Okay, so yes, I do need space to be moving around, surfaces to pile things on, the physicality. Also, when I'm working, I pace. I just go back and forth because I think when I'm walking, and I don't sit still very well.
So what does it mean to be a Southerner to you?
What does it mean to be a Southerner? It means a lot of different things to me. Because I've also analyzed my work thinking about being a Southerner. I do think one thing, which is I think kind of funny, is that, and I was talking to Carrie about skin. In New York, my skin is very soft. It's Southern skin. It's soft. But when I'm in here, my skin is tougher. I've lived away. I've got a little bit more aggressiveness in me. And Southerners are very polite, which is when I'm in the North, I am probably nicer. And I say thank you to everybody. I'm learning to be nicer here, which is, I'm working on it. But it's just that it's because it's the contrast. And again, I think as the culture we have is very layered with different meanings. The whole country is that way now. But I think but there's so many, we have the ability to listen and think together.
Going into our next viewer question from Allison W, just while we're on the topic of Birmingham, she asked, how do you stay in the community?
So being here is a little bit easier because I'm going to back up. Even when I was in New York, I was always talking to Birmingham. So even living there, there were studios in this building, then ground floor even started, Space 111 and Aerosmith and Peter Prince were in the building at one time. So I felt a real connection to Birmingham. And but coming back here, it's been wonderful because there are people that come and go in the building. And and I think it's important for all of us to show up and see, even though I'm not doing as good a job right now, I will admit, but to show up and see what other people are doing. I have one show that I've got to get to before it closes at the Paperworkers local. But we need to be connected, and we need to know what is on, what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm. And did you mindset going back to the inception of 21st Street Studios and ground floor contemporary, was that all those kind of the basis thinking for that?
Well, it should have been.
Yeah.
But, I was the landlord too. And I was surviving in New York. So when you leave and you have a 3-story building, then you think about renting spaces. But everything you do can have other real strong values with it. So, or benefits. So having the studios really kept me connected and made me realize that, oh good, this is, and I also knew something which was interesting. Since I have set up so many studios myself, I sort of know how to try to get people set up, try to help them think about that it's going to take time. going to probably do some crappy work. We all do crappy work until we sort of get used to our environment, and then sort of get more. We've got to go into it. And I think it's also been helpful that I have always liked a community of people. I have, I bounce off people. I think that we all help to help other people to push themselves. And so I think that those sort of things have helped me to make this place a good place. And then ground floor contemporary really happened when one of the Ray Tremere said, I can't walk those 3 flights of stairs. Can't we have a ground floor? And so it was a group that got together, and I was still in New York, and I thought, okay, I think we can. And so we started, and we've made it work. And it's been a great place. I mean, I love it, and I think a lot of us do.
Mm-hmm. Well, based on your experience, what would you say is the biggest determinant of success for a cooperative art space?
Community. And I think this has been a really hard thing during the COVID. Communication. And I don't know, I'm hoping we're going to figure out how to do it a little better. But it's you sort of struggle with it and trying to make it work. But it is supporting each other, being open to safe discussions, discussions where where you can say something and not be slammed, or somebody's going to look at some of your work and say, now what is it you're doing? I think this, but this, I'm not sure that that. So it's supportive and involvement.
Yeah, I was just thinking about in COVID and just thinking about all the openings being here, and it made me just, I feel like you have it down to a science, almost how you're able to nurture the community within the space. I mean, maybe it just looks like that from the outside looking in. But do you think that just comes from just this open, making people feel a sense of community with everyone? Do you think that like you encourage interaction post or before COVID, of course, meetings or something?
Oh yeah, well we haven't, everybody's schedules are so hard to figure, and I think here the whole thing too about being an environment where we can experiment. Mm-hmm. One of the gifts we have here is we don't have to sell like at ground floor. You can, and artists do, which is great because we would like to encourage a lot more of that. But it's also about the work, whatever it is, that if you think you want to do something, we're going to encourage you to push on and let's figure it out and to go on. Mm-hmm. So, and I think it's really, really important that we are positive for each other. That doesn't mean that we're not critical and come out with, what on earth are you doing there or something like that. But it also means that we want everyone to grow and that we want to support us. We want all of us to support each other. And I think we're learning. I think that's a lot of what you're about is doing. And so I think we haven't got it as a science. We're working on it.
All right, so going on to our second to last question before we get into some more of the viewer questions. Your work is dynamic and seems to be about change. It has an aesthetic that is always alive and changing, whether from the light, sound, or perception of the viewer. What kind of relationship do you have with change in your own life?
I think I probably like it. I don't mind struggles, like I said, and I can't really think of any. Well, no, well, let's just take the New York move. Okay, that was a big dramatic move for me because when I left, but coming back, so I did a lot of pre-planning to make it work well. And then you come up with things that are out of that stuff, and you make those work. So I think change, if I can, so I've got some issue, and I think issues make us change. The COVID, so how do we do things? How do we do, this is a great thing for us to be doing, but how do we make some more things happen? Mm-hmm. And we all, as a community, have to sort of think together how we do it. And how can we deal with the diversity, and how can we bring more of us together and have real conversations? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be an issue, and I don't know how we do that yet, because we are very, we don't have many males here, and we're very white. And so how do we get some conversation? So I don't know, but it's going to have to be, because this is part of what we have to all, we have to be people, and we have to understand what everybody's working on.
Mm-hmm. So this segues great into the last question I've written down, which is, what do you think has allowed you to consistently make such bold and innovative decisions in your work for so many years?
Well, I don't mind being nervous again. It was like when I moved to New York, and it was a big deal, but I went up there for 3 months, and up there it didn't seem so hard. But coming back here, it seemed like a huge thing. But with the work, and I guess I should answer it this way. Excuse me, let me just back up and start again. The work has always been the critical to me. And so I have to make I have to go in a direction that the work needs. And I have to figure out how it's going to be. What am I experimenting with? How do I understand it? And the other thing is, when I am in the process, I'm trying to figure out, what am I doing? And how is it going to work? And understand what it is, so that you can later look back at it. And that's what's been a gift here, is with the book. I've been able to look back and see how the threads and the layers have just weave through, and I'm not trying to think about that. I'm into whatever it is at that moment I'm doing.
Present. Just being present.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty present. I'm joking. We are.
Yeah. Was it always easy for you to be so present? Or just something you learned?
I don't know.
Yeah. Just kind of what with the flow.
Right. I think that I think it's the gifts when you get to be in a project that you really have to work hard, and so you have to be there. Mm-hmm. And I do have tunnel vision, and I do love it when I get to go there, and not everything else isn't jumping, but that's sort of right in that focus. And I do let everything go by the side, and I pay the price for doing that. But it's and then you're not thinking about something being bold. Mm-hmm. You're just doing it.
Yeah.
It's not bold.
Yeah. All right. It may be bold from the outside looking in, but in your mind, you're just doing the work.
Yeah, just doing the work. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get to the viewer questions. Again, leave questions in the chat, and we will compile what questions we do have. So give us a few minutes, and we'll be right back.
Do you want me to just answer anything, or we don't have? Go ahead.
Well, I'll get this.
I think Carrie's going to put some of the questions up that in the viewer. So I'll just sort of talk about the space, because we're talking about spaces. When I was here, this for me was very much of a New York space. And that right behind where you are, I ended up building a sort of bed up high in a little kitchen. And it was I had only 3,500 square feet, and I didn't want the living to take over too much space. And now, at the age I am, I think I can have a whole room, which is that I can have some space to sit and read something, and even though it's covered with papers. But again, the space is the physicality of the space for me. It's just an interesting in how we relate to whatever is there, or how this line becomes out as a shape into the space. And I think of my work is very much about drawing in space. It's not about with the sculpture. It's not mass. It is it has a huge amount of linear lines in it. I think we're about ready for questions.
Yes. I guess I can just read it.
Yeah, just read it.
Okay. So this question is, what question ideas drive your artwork?
What questions or ideas drive my artwork? I probably am driven more with projects, and so what ideas? Okay, well, let's talk about concepts or the things that sort of organic changing systems, that contradictions, that man-made and the natural, all of in that sort of shifts of reality. When I've been all of these things are sort of in the projects that go along, but I am very project oriented in the fact that when I'm doing the book, when I'm doing the Airplayers, when I'm doing the atriums, or when I'm doing a drawing series that I get into, and then at that point, that project sort of is in where the ideas are.
All right. And the next question is from Neil G. What advice would you give to emerging artists?
Okay, work. Understand. Don't do the visual arts or the arts if you don't want to work, and that's and enjoy it. And they think that this is, enjoy the pain, enjoy the being lost, enjoy the struggle of not doing things that aren't very great, and then be happy when you get it, and then you're going on to the next when you're going to be lost again. But don't go into it to make money. Go into it because you have to. You can't do anything else. Because it's not an easy life. It has to be what you want. And so I just think those are the things. Go into it supporting other people too. Your community, your art community, is going to be your team people. They are going to be the ones that help you, support you. So you go into it as, knowing your community, knowing you're going to fail, knowing you don't want to be doing something just to sell, that you're doing it for yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Do you make for a space to create?
Do I make for a space to create? I very much do. a gallery, whatever space I'm going into, I've used it pretty much planned out what it's going to look like, and then I make changes. So I'm very concerned with, we work on it downstairs with just, what happens when you walk in the front door? What do you see? How do you look at it? It bothers me that this drawing behind me is not, in the center of the wall and right. But these drawings are hard to move, and you have to have 2 or 3 people, and it's up there to flatten it. So I thought, I didn't think about I was going to stand in front of it. But that, if I were you all, it would have bothered me looking at it this way to see that it's off and it's a little off. But so definitely, I do think about spaces, and I think that painters and that it's important for everyone to really even to think about how the work is, what's the height, how are you viewing it in the this ceiling is so much higher than another space. What about the height of it in relation with that? Yeah.
You kind of touched on this, but Nikki L asks, what inspires you to create art?
I know, I did do that one. And again, part of it is that you need to do it. And yeah.
Arlene asks, and you touched on this, but I guess you could briefly sum it up, but she said, what is your practice to
I practice to create.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do we think? I wish we had her to ask her.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the question.
Yeah, I guess maybe we'll talk about when you do actually create. Is there do you have any rituals you do, or
Okay,
you
yeah.
know?
No.
Okay.
I do in the morning really sit quiet, and I find that if I was really struggling with something, if I can go to bed and get up the next morning, I might have a clearer head. Or if I get horizontal for a little bit, or if I take a walk and I pace around. I know people that really do try to get in a sort of mood. I think it is a meditative mood in a sort of sense that when you just zone in, I think that's what I do. But I don't, I'm not aware of it. Again, is that, when problems we have sometimes are gifts, and that tunnel vision is a gift for me, that I can just tune in.
Mm-hmm. Bethany asks, did you go to school for art?
I did go to school for art, but my first time around, I went to Birmingham Southern, and I had an elementary education degree. And I taught for a few years in elementary, and then I was going to go back, and I decided I really love science, and I was going to go back in science. In the meantime, things changed, and I started in art. I started at the Birmingham Museum, really studying, and then went to UAB, then to graduate school, got away a couple of times, went to NYU for a little bit, and then moved to New York. But it was very, once I started, I just went, right on. I taught here too. And that is not the route everybody needs. I should say, I think the gift of graduate school is or school. I think what it does is it concentrates you, and I know that lots of people have just taken courses, which is great. There's multiple ways to do everything, and we really have to think about ourselves and what was best for us. For me, going with the concentrated, I was older, and that was a gift because you're sort of more. You sort of do what you think you want to do, and after you gone through a little bit older. So that was a help. But I think that there are again so many different ways to get from here, from A to B, D. So I think that I'm just saying that I did one of them. And again, we don't have to do it at a certain age. We can do different ages. People going back to school or starting working and focusing. It's you figure it out. And
Jane W asks, when you create each work of art, do you see it connected to past and future works, or do you stand alone?
So that's a good question to go, because I answered it in some other ways. I think everything is connected to the past in the future. But let me say a little bit about this, that when I was doing the Airplayers series, I was working with installations very modular, and where they all were forms that related to each other. And the one that close to the very end, I ended up with realizing the pieces were no longer modular. So all of a sudden, what I had thought was different. So that it wasn't, the parts didn't have to be in an installation. And that's pretty much when I stopped the series.
Coming down the home stretch, this is the last 5, and we're making really good time because we're about 15 minutes left. So,
Okay.
So Willow Scott asks, what are your ongoing dreams, goals for 21st Street Studios?
Thank you, Will. I wish we could really enlarge and have more discussion with our communities. And somehow some of the people involved could start it too. I don't know how we do this, and maybe we have to end up opening up to a larger community and figuring out how do we do it from in the situation we're in right now. I don't know, but I think we do. I'm going to back up too. The 21st Street Studios are workspaces. And ground floor is a cooperative. And so I'm hoping that we all can start to be more involved in this community. And also not just Birmingham, reaching out in the state, reaching out in the southeast. We have, in the internet, we have, more things that we can do. And how do we do that? Because I think that one of the things we have to encourage each other to do is that we shouldn't be limited by where we are. We need to be able to go and we need to be able to have communication with the world. Mm-hmm. And as Willa, maybe she's going to be part of it.
Pat P asks, what do you most like to talk about? Concept, process, product? Would you tell us something about each?
Okay. Concept, process, product.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think the easier to talk about is process and product. The concept, part of my problem is that I think that the concepts that I have worked with along the way show up in the pieces. I am very different from a person that says, this is the concept I'm working with. Now I'm going to do a piece that does this concept. So, we all are different. we're just so different. I'm very affected by the process to help me discover how I'm getting to the product over here. And I think for me personally, the concepts that sort of flow in here, they just sort of come out with, with breathing, with contradictions, with organicness. Those are the sort of the things that I work with that go into it. And then the concept is also affected by what I'm trying to do. So, yeah.
Barbie, she asks, what have been the most significant milestones or accomplishments in your career as an artist?
So, what would I say to that? Is that really, again, the pieces that I have struggled with the most would be some of the pieces that I might feel the best about, because I began over here and I had to get over there, and I didn't know how I was getting over there, and so, but I got over there. So that is, and I felt like it was a really good piece. So those would be some of the milestones. Some of the last two atriums, the Airplayers books, these drawings. I was going to, with these, I started out, there was a show scheduled, and I knew the concept that I wanted was that translation, and again, translation of something, of time and movement and space. And I knew the sizes I was going to, but it was like, how am I getting there? And I started doing really crappy work. And it was like, the gallery director said, oh, I think we should postpone the show. I said, oh, just don't come down, wait, give me a chance. And it worked, it was fine. But it is some of that, So those to me, I think I pulled it off.
So the last viewer question we have from Amy M. Do you keep a sketchbook?
I do a lot of. I don't keep the sketchbook, no. So that's a bit. I end up doing a lot of drawings for a different project or what I'm doing. I make, I'll make models. I'll make everything. Just with hand. I don't really keep it in a book. I'm not so good at that. I'll make books, but I don't, and that can, I think people that make these wonderful journals and write and they're in there is a great, great, because it sort of gives you being able to go back to it. I sort of keep things in piles. And with this book, I found out I could go back to a lot, which was amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess step back in the shot. So I guess just in closing, do you want to talk a little bit about next steps for your book and kind of where that process is at, and how people can stay up to date with everything you have going?
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
I told you that we have a show at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa at the UA Gallery, and also at the Art Council Gallery, and they are literally going to have a Friday opening on September the 4th, we think, and I think it's from either 5 or 6 to 8, and you have to wear masks, and only so many people can go in at once. But I'm pleased that there might, be more this opening. So that's happening. The book goes to the printer the 14th of September, right in then, and so it's moving. And then it will come out in October. There's not a real date yet because his Paul reminds me, it's being printed in Canada. What I would love if anybody would email Carrie to get on, I'd love to be able to send you out a notice. about when the book is happening and in the shows that are going on. Yeah.
And I would like to thank everyone for taking time to join us today. This is the first Art in Conversation with this new virtual format. And, it's been a learning process for us all. And appreciate all of your questions. And please share any feedback you may have. We're all trying to learn and grow with this platform. And really appreciate Sarah for taking the time to show us her space and everything that she's been working on. So it's always great speaking with you, and thank you.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you so much.